Welcome to the Hope Dealer Show. I am your host, Kristen Joy Greer. I'm a principal, an author, speaker, artist, leadership coach, actor, and an auntie to one amazing nephew. But overall, I hope to live a life where I have learned to be a hope dealer. I'm so excited that you're listening into this show. I am just more than thrilled to share real life transformative stories of hope and empowerment. I mean, who doesn't need hope, right? We do. In this world, we absolutely need hope. So this is going to be an exciting journey. I'll be sharing my hope-filled journey. I'm going to be interviewing active and engaging hope dealers around this world who are making a difference in our society and within their communities. And more importantly, I hope that this podcast inspires you to be the hope that you wish to see in the world. Let's get ready to go, hope dealers. Welcome back, hope dealers. So excited for today's show. You are going to be thrilled with who we have today. As you know, I'm your host, Kristen Joy Greer, and I'm excited to share with you just a little bit of hope from a very special guest today, Brandon Frame. Everybody, let's welcome Brandon. Brandon, thank you for joining today's show.
Oh, no, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here and be a guest. Thank you for thinking enough of me to join you. So I'm here and excited to be a part of the conversation.
Absolutely. Now, Brandon, listen, I have got an opportunity to meet you in the professional world with working with our schools, but I just heard that you're doing some amazing things just independently as well. So why don't you just share a little bit about who you are, what you do, let our listeners know.
Brandon Frame, currently residing in the Bronx. I'm originally from Connecticut. I attended Morehouse College. A little bit about me. I see myself as a role model, a scholar, and a gentleman, a Renaissance man with a social conscience and a global perspective. I am just doing my part to occupy my space in the world, or paying my service. The work that I do is my rent to occupy my space in the world. I believe that ideas are spiritual children seated by God inside of us, and He gives us the tools and places, the people around us to manifest those into reality.
Wow. That's so powerful. I love that. Like, you get to occupy, you serve to occupy. Like, that's great. Can you say that last thing again? The ideas God-given? I want to hear that again.
Yeah, ideas are spiritual children seated by God inside of us, and He places the tools and people around us to manifest those ideas into reality.
Wow. Hope dealers, did y'all hear that? Did you really hear that? That's powerful. That's powerful. Did you write that?
Yeah, I mean, it came in a speech, and then it was a person that I would follow. She doesn't do as many newsletters, but she used to write these newsletters about like inspired living. And so that's where I like really kind of captured that thought process.
That's so cool. I love that. Now listen, you are founder of the Blackmen Can. Can you talk a little bit about what the Blackmen Can is and what led you to starting it?
The Blackmen Can is a nonprofit organization focused on creating and amplifying stories of what Black men and boys can do. I started as a blog in April of 2010. Over the last 10 years, we have just kind of grown into continuing with that blog and media aspect, but also getting into schools and communities so that we can celebrate, educate, and inspire Black men and boys.
I love that. I mean, just currently, as a principal of a high school in East New York, Brooklyn, there aren't, there's just a wealth of need for amplifying Black men, and amplifying their stories. And I love that this organization, so congratulations on a decade. That's pretty powerful. But I love that you have this organization to inspire. And, can you talk like a little bit about like what led you to say in April 2010, like this is something I have to do?
I think some of the stuff built up to that or led up to that, I would say, attending Morehouse and hearing the stories and narratives of my fellow brothers, working in East Atlanta at a charter school, Charles R. Drew Charter School on the east side of Atlanta, and working with the young people there, working at the Fessenden School, which is the first school I taught at after I graduated, and working with the Black boys at the Fessenden School. I think these are all different factors, and there's other ones that I probably could name, and different stories in each one of those respective areas that all became a catalyst. And when you put that all together, there became the idea, right? That came from God, like, the Black man can, right? And so then it was like, just started, bought the domain name, and it's kind of kept growing and building. I think there's one thing, and we're talking about hope dealers. And if you want to be a hope dealer or you consider yourself a hope dealer, one key aspect to that is perseverance and consistency, or two key aspects, consistency and perseverance. And I think that those are just two hallmarks that I've been able to hone in on and try to hold close to my own heart to move things forward.
That's powerful. I mean, obviously, in this present day, there are so many negative factors against Black men, just overall, and just knowing a lot about Black culture. And obviously you went to an HBCU and you've been around a lot of amazing Black men and Black stories. I just wonder what your perspective is, with everything going on, with the atrocities and just everything that's going on in this present day, dealing with the racial inequalities, specifically affecting the Black man. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's so heavy to know that while we can point to different examples of progress, systemic and institutional racism, and these barriers and the glass ceiling is still there. And just thinking about what all we have to do to create the communities and spaces for Black men to come together to talk about these things and then share strategies to push past and push through these different issues, or how do we turn anger and frustration into movement and policy?
Yeah.
Really important to create communities to have those discussions so that we can move forward together. Simultaneously, I think that one aspect of that for us men also is to internalize that we are both victims and agents of oppression.
Wow.
Right? Like that's like the growth that we have to make as Black men is for example, you just pointed out, like, tell me about, being a Black man and the issues, but like in order for us to truly move forward, we can have those discussions, but we also know, or we should know, and all Black men know that we can't move forward without Black women. But the only way for us to actually move forward together is for us to realize the power and privilege that we actually have as men, even though we're Black men. And so we obviously don't have white male privilege, right? But we do have male privilege. There is privilege that comes into my life as a Black man, right? Because I'm man, right? And so therefore, to acknowledge those things, because that way I can hear and support the voices of Black women and girls. And so then we can move lock and step together.
Right.
That's like the growth that we have to make as well when if we're thinking about the issues of the time and thinking about how we are going to overcome systemic and institutional racism, right? Break through the glass ceiling. Like it can't be, well, Black men have to break through and then we can bring Black women along. No, we have to break it together. But the real way to only break it together is for us to realize the place of privilege that we actually sit in, especially in Black spaces, right? Sometimes it's really hard for us to see it because it's happening to us as well. But we also know that Black women is double oppression, right? Because it's Black and woman, right? So it's important for us to make that growth as well as we're looking at the changes that we want to make and how we want to move our communities forward.
I love that. I love that you said, victims and agents, like, just going back to, the slavery era and seeing how the Black man was ripped from families and placed in different plantations and then building new families and then ripped again or becoming crippled or disabled. And unfortunately, you zoom out and you see that same dynamic in a lot of Black communities, and it's specifically plaguing the Black man. But then you also mention agents, which I think is so powerful. One of my favorite lines is to be an agent of change, like seeing a Black man as an agent of change, someone that is shifting, and changing the status quo and disrupting the status quo, and not just alone, together with women and with the Black woman who is also a victim and an agent to systematic and racial institutionalization, which I think is just a huge part of the work that you're doing right now. And I know you, beyond the Black Man Canon, you're doing that work with your own organization and just working in schools and helping the next generation feel empowered and understand that. But I have to ask you, just speaking of the next generation, how are these atrocities that are affecting the Black man, the victimized mentality and then the lack of agency? How do you feel like that is affecting the next generation of young men?
I mean, when I think about it, when I think about the next generation, like being a millennial myself, so I guess the next generation is like Generation Z, right? Mm-hmm. And so thinking about that, like I think they are, so when I have siblings, right? And I talk to them, and it's interesting to have conversations with them growing up in an era of Black Lives Matter, right? Growing up in an era where you wear African print clothing, where Black women and Black girls can wear their hair natural. Mm-hmm. All these things are like, that was not my middle school or teenage years, right? That was not what was in, that's not the norm or anything. So I think like it's interesting where they are actually realizing or understanding even more out there, a little bit more of their own personal identity and self-identity, as well as about racism and power and privilege and all these things. And so I see, like, when I think of when they become the leaders of the country, what's important for us as the generation that's about to kind of assume leadership roles, like the next, maybe not the next president, but the president after that could be like a millennial, right? Because once we hit into we can't become president until you're after 40, older than 40 years old, right?
A lot of us are knocking on 40.
Right, so like that's going to be, millennials will be soon running this country, right? And so I think about the intergenerational mantle passing that has to happen for us. So it's important for us, again, not as we create groups as men, to think about the spaces that we create to pass down information and knowledge to the next generation, but also meeting them where they're at. So it's not about telling them what they have to do, but providing that vision or a guide or a manuscript or a handbook, a toolbox of, here's the things that you have to think about, combining your talents and your abilities and your use of technology, combining that with some know-how and some just good old-fashioned get on your knees type of work, right? And combine that together so that they can then assume leadership roles and really carry on the change that we're creating right now. So I think one thing, if you're an agent of change, a lot of times people don't think about this, but what you have to think about, if you're a hope dealer, if you're an agent of change, is that the work that you're doing, probably you're not going to see it through.
Right?
And people don't. It's one of those things. Like we don't necessarily think about. Like, you have to think. But if you're starting something or you're the next in the movement, like, let's think about John Lewis, right? Like, he didn't actually see his work through, right? It's important that he built ambassadors. He built people to follow him, so that when he passes away, which he has, there's another cohort of people, another generation that is going to carry on the work and move it forward. And so if you're a hope dealer, if you're an agent of change, you have to internalize that the work that you're doing and whatever, and that's why you have to also celebrate your wins along the way, because the outcome, like what you want, the utopian thought that you tell people like, man, this is what's got to happen. And they're like, man, it ain't never going to happen. Right? But that's how you do the work. You probably won't see what you're saying happen. That's why you have to create the movement and create the policies so that the generations behind you, they're going to actually see it.
Wow. No, that's powerful. That is powerful. I think you're absolutely right. Like, how many, I think about where you went and just Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and just how a lot of agents of change or hope dealers or people that are on the front line of trying to see shifts in a major way, they are going to have to go through so much adversity just to be able to make the playing field leveled, so that the next generation can rise. A wise man told me, you always are reaping from those that went before you and always sowing to the next generation simultaneously. Like there is no, I get to the place and then I'm like, okay, let me focus on the next generation. You always have to be thinking about who's next, thinking about hip hop Harry, who's next, right? Like just always being prepared for that next generation. Speaking of, you talked a lot about policy and reform, and I'd like to know, what advice would you give to our listeners regarding their involvement in reform and policy?
I always start, just because he passed away, so he's at the forefront of my mind, but it's like the first step is to vote, but it's also creating so when I think about this is where I think so much about what we do in the K through 12 education. K through 12 education is like the one thing that we all have in common, right? Like it doesn't matter if you have a lot of money or you don't have any money. It doesn't matter if you were born here or you weren't born here and you get it, but you weren't born here, but you get here. K through 12 education, we all experience it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So when I think about that, I think about how do we reimagine how we do school that allows for all our young people to really want to be involved in the policy process. And what things are happening in each other's community. Like when we're doing U.S. history or even world history, how do we actually make that localized? And something that that's what adults do. Yeah. Right? You might have a few kids here and there, like the climate change and everything, but what happens if we reimagine school so that young people really understand politics, understand policy, and the way that their community looks, whether you live in an urban, suburban, or rural community, the way that it looks was decisions generations before you. That's right. The way Brooklyn looks right now
was pre-planned.
Me and you had nothing to do with what happened. The way Brooklyn looks now was decided 15 years ago.
Yep.
So how do we make sure that young people are involved and understand that that's how things work, right? And that allows for them to advocate for their voice, to develop their voice, to understand their community and why it looks the way that it does and why it's missing or has the resources that it has. And so I think about that because when I think about education, I've never heard a young person say, this is just about reimagining school to begin with. I've never heard a young person say, I don't like education. I've only heard a young person say, I don't like school. Right? And so what do we have to do to infuse the love for education into school, which is something that people are just school, this process of school. There's nothing, once you find what you like or what you're into, you want to get educated.
Invested in it.
I want to learn more about this thing. Right. School is what kids don't like. Right. And so what do we need to do in our school buildings and K through 12 education that has kids saying I can't wait to go to school. Yeah. I love going to school.
Yeah, no, that's good. And especially a lot of Black boys struggle with school, and obviously we talked about how, systematic racism is evident also in our K through 12 structures. And it can be very isolating to our young Black men who are learning to navigate the world. And so I just want to hear your thoughts on that. For the educators that are listening or for, those that are working in schools, what can they do to actually see through making the shifts and helping young men, Black boys or brown boys or any boys understand their power and understand their relevance in this society?
Absolutely. And so what I would say, the first thing I would ask the educators who are listening, who will listen to this and say, how are you making your school or classroom a place where Black boy brilliance thrives? Right? Because I always think about, so I like to use, different types of people. So I think about Quavo, right? Who is part of the Migos, and he is a millionaire a couple of times over because he's a musician. I'm an artist. But this past June, he graduated from high school, right? So I'm looking at what is Black boy brilliance, right? Manifested into an adult, into lots of money and a really great life, right? What was it in his school that didn't allow for that to thrive. For him to just walk across the stage with his high school diploma. The college discussion, that's a whole nother discussion, but like he should have walked across with his high school diploma. And what about the school did not allow for Black boy brilliance to thrive? And then how many, and then he has an exceptional talent and charisma that allowed him to be the artist. But like, if that's what's happening to him, what happens to just the average Black boy, right?
Exactly.
And but that also has the brilliance inside of him. So I think that's a big key is like, how are we creating schools that allow for Black boy brilliance to thrive, for creativity to thrive, with the work, social emotional learning has a lot to do with that, as well as all the different other core, subject areas, but really thinking about how we're developing those social emotional development of our young people and creating schools that have the mechanisms and the systems in place, again, to allow for it to thrive and for Black boys to flourish.
No, I mean, that's a very, very important point. I think, so one of the things at my school that we do is we have something called engagement pathways, where every student has to explore like who you are, what is it that you're excited about? And that might be art, that might be music, that might be dance, that might be sports, whatever it is. But we want to treat it like your thing, and allow you the flexibility to say, oh, I'm really good at football, but I really love art. I really love music and I want to learn how to be a music producer. And so we invest in them by bringing in real world artists and people that have been in that field to come in and support and teach and cultivate. But, what we found is that there are many of our youth who just have not tapped in or don't even know what it looks like to explore their brilliance, and because a lot of this that you're describing is so suffocating, the school system is just so like rigid, it can be, this is why this might be an unpopular opinion, but I love where we are right now. I love that we are forced to innovate, because it's like we were used to a very rigid structure that has unfortunately stifled, the potential of so many youth, especially our Black boys. So I love that example. I hope I can bring Quavo to my students. So if you have this number, let me know, Brandon. But, just thinking about legacy, and you talked a lot about John Lewis and you talked about the next generation. What do you want your legacy to be when it comes to the next generation of young men that are coming up before you? And what do you hope to inspire for men, young men, and entrepreneurs?
I hope to inspire that you can define yourself so you can redefine the world, right? Mm-hmm. So like, that's like the legacy that I would like to live, that you should be so reminded of Martin and Malcolm, yet so inspired to sketch your own path. Mm-hmm. And so like, and that you can make anything happen if you're willing to put the work in. I think one thing I talk to young people about now when I get a chance to do a keynote or whatever it may be, that, I always talk about, don't let social media rush you.
Right.
Everything that is great is a process. Mm-hmm. There's yes, you can go viral, right? You can do these things, but like, how are you going to, consistency and work over time is what allows for all to thrive and flourish. Right. So it's kind of like, I sometimes even use a basketball, especially when I'm talking to boys, I use like a basketball reference. Like if you're like 6'9" with amazing athletic ability, you're probably a lottery pick. You're probably going to go to the NBA, right? Just using that as an example. However, it's going to take the work to actually be a Hall of Famer. Yeah. No person, you don't look at a person and say they're going to the Hall of Fame. You might say like, you can. You'll come out and, you're going to get an opportunity. You might get a shot. Right. But once you get that shot, the question is, are you going to do the work to do it, right? We see when we're watching sports, we see the 2 hours of the game. It's about what you do the other 22 hours.
Yeah, that's right.
So when we see somebody speaking and they're amazing at speaking, what are they doing the other 22 hours so they're an amazing speaker? When that teacher, we see that one class, but what about the work that teacher was doing so that class is amazing? That's what you don't always see, right? And so like really getting to hone in on legacy being like, it's about respecting the process. If you respect the process, you'll see the fruits of your labor. If you plant seeds, you will reap a harvest. And like, I even use this time, right? This time of the pandemic, while there's, for me individually, there has been a lot of really good things that have happened to me, but it's literally because of seeds that I planted years ago, right? Some seeds 5 and 6 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So that's the work, though. You continue to plant seeds, and the harvest comes. The harvest comes at different times. Every day you should be planting seeds and doing the work, and know that God's timing is never wrong. And so that harvest will come when it's supposed to, and when it comes, it's because you're ready.
That's good. I mean, that's so my life. Like, I love the principle of sowing and reaping, because the reality is that, like you mentioned, sometimes you may not even see it in your lifetime. It may happen later on in life where you're like, oh, wow. Or people may celebrate you. I think about Michael Jordan and his documentary, which I love. Obviously, I'm from Chicago, so I love everything Bulls, But I think about all the stuff that he talks about that he went through that no one would have known unless he opened his mouth, and like the fruit of him just being consistent and diligent, and now seeing a lot of that, some of it, and some stuff we will never see, or he will never see. But I just think it's powerful, to always be consistent around what's next and what the next generation has. Wow, Brandon, you have really wowed us today. I mean, with just so much knowledge. I'm telling you guys, if you're not already following The Black Man Can, you need to go over there, Facebook, Instagram, follow The Black Man Can, because Brandon Frame is doing some amazing things. So Brandon, what are you currently working on? Where can people find you? I kind of spilled the beans on The Black Man Can, but where can people find you and what are you working on?
The Black Man Can, at Brandon Frame. That's the social media handles. Mm-hmm. One thing I'm working on, I'm in graduate school, so I'm a doctoral student. So I am at Boston University, so I'm excited about that. May 2023, I should be Dr. Frame.
All right.
Here before we know it, so that's cool. And then for The Black Man Can, we're looking at a few different things. We're looking at, making a play into the technology space and what that could look like as we try to go our movement in our community. Our apparel business now as well, so you can go get Black Man Can merchandise on blackmancan.com. Those are just two major things, and then similar to what we kind of talked about before with the first question in terms of my response around, male privilege, Black male privilege, and thinking about what does that look like to discuss that in a book. So
all right.
I got a bunch of different ideas, always working on different projects. And also continue to just create more content. We share a lot of content, and we're looking to create more original content. So we're looking at opportunities to do that as well. So I'm excited about continuing to just push our mission, our movement, our vision forward, so that we can create a space where Black men are seen as humans, where Black men are seen not as monolithic, but that we are diverse human beings making a difference in communities all across the world.
And you are an example of that. So, Brandon, I salute you, and I want to thank you for being a part of this show, but more importantly, being someone that is dealing hope, not just in the lives of those around you, but also in the lives of men and in the lives of young men in the school system. So thank you for being a hope dealer today. Just wanting to allow you any final words or any final thoughts that you may have.
I have when I get asked this question, I have different go-tos.
Yeah.
And so when I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about the hope dealers, the mission and vision of what you are doing. Yeah. I'll say this is a quick story taking me a few minutes. So 7-Up, right? We've all had 7-Up maybe at some point. It's called 7-Up because it took them 7 different formulas before they got all the right chemicals together to make 7-Up. WD-40, right? We had that in our houses, many of our houses we saw it growing up. Yeah. WD-40 stands for water displacement, WD, perfected, that's the dash, on the 40th try. WD-40, water displacement perfected on the 40th try. 409, some of us use it in our house to clean the kitchen or the bathroom. 409 is called 409 because it took them 409 times before they got all the right chemicals together to make 409. And as we are all hope dealers, the truth of the matter is, one, we could think of something that we started, and on the second time we quit. So that's the first, right? But what we have to acknowledge is that with our dreams, with our goals, with the hope that we have, and the contributions that we want to make, the goals that we are pursuing, it might take 7 times, it might take 40 times, it just might take 409 times
Yeah.
You're consistent and you are persistent and you persevere. Your dreams, your goals, the things that you're striving for can become a reality, just like all those products, which are all billion-dollar products at this point since their creation, because inside of you is a billion-dollar idea that you must manifest. You have tools and the people around you to make it happen, right? But there will be stumbling blocks, but you have to turn those stumbling blocks into stepping stones. And it might be 7, it might be 40, it might be 409. But if you persevere and you're consistent, it can become reality.
Wow. Mic drop. That was so good. That was so good. And I hope that everyone listening really understood all the different layers of what you just shared. But I thank you so much, Brandon, for being on this show as a hope dealer. You are inspiring hope everywhere you go. And so we wish you well. And I encourage you on your journey to keep going, keep dealing hope. Thank you, Brandon. So Hope Dealers, wow, we had another Hope Dealer inspiring hope all over this world, Brandon Frame of the Black Man Can. I hope you were listening today. I really hope that you were able to gravitate. For the Black man listening, we salute you. We empower you. We want you to know that we love you and we believe that there's brilliance on the inside of you. And for those of us that are already empowering Black men, keep it up. And for those of us that have been a victim of oppressing the Black man, hopefully this will be encouragement to you to never, ever forget that we are all created in one image. It is our decision to live out a life of either giving hope or repelling it. And so today, Brandon gave multiple examples, and I'm so excited. He talked about perseverance. He talked about grit. He talked about getting involved in policy and reform. But most of all, he inspired everyone listening that there is a hope dealer on the inside of you. There's a $1 billion idea that's sitting, waiting for you to thrive. Congratulations to you all that finished this episode, that were able to listen to this show, because you now have a different outlook on what it means and what it actually takes. We thank you for listening. And as always, I'm Kristen Joy Greer, and I'm thankful that you were listening to today's show. And as I always say, be the hope that you wish to see in the world. Bye.